The small hero of Dust Bowl Creek. Once upon a time, in a small, dusty town called Dust Bowl Creek, there lived a tiny, scruffy dog named Waffles. Now, Waffles wasn't a golden retriever, or a tall, sleek greyhound. He was just a little, brown, ball of fur, with one ear that always pointed south. The town was ruled by a Great Dane named Duke. Duke was huge. He had a bark that sounded like rolling thunder, and he thought, because he was the biggest, he was the boss of everyone. One scorching afternoon, the town's only water well went bone dry. The animals were thirsty, the humans were worried, and Duke just stood there, barking at the hole, as if his volume could make the water rise. I am the strongest. Duke boomed. I will dig until the earth gives up its treasure. He dug, but his paws were too big. He just made a mess, and the dust made everyone cough. That's when little Waffles trotted up to the edge. Excuse me, Mr. Duke, Waffles squeaked. Maybe we don't need to dig deeper. Maybe we just need to look closer. Duke laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. What can a tiny thing like you possibly know? Waffles didn't bark back. Instead, he used his tiny nose and sniffed. He followed a scent, past the old barn, under the rusted tractor, all the way to a pile of rocks that everyone had ignored for years. Beneath the rocks was a small, hidden pipe that had been clogged with old leaves. Waffles squeezed his tiny body into the tight space where Duke could never fit. He wiggled, and he pushed, and he cleared the leaves, one by one. Suddenly, splash! Cool, clear water began to flow again. The town cheered. Duke looked down at his paws, then at the little dog, who was soaking wet, but wagging his tail. You see, Waffles said, it's not always about being the biggest or the loudest. Sometimes, it's about being small enough to see what everyone else is missing. From that day on, Waffles wasn't just a scruffy dog. He was the sheriff of the spring, proving to everyone in Dust Bowl Creek that true power isn't in your size, it's in your heart. The Great Storm of Dust Bowl Creek, a lesson in teamwork. In our last story, little Waffles saved the town's water, but life in Dust Bowl Creek was about to get a whole lot wilder. You see, the sky over the prairie can turn from blue to a bruised, angry purple in the blink of an eye. One Tuesday, the wind started to whistle, a low, eerie sound. The old-timers called it the Whistler. A storm so big, it could pick up a cow and put it down in the next county. Duke, the Great Dane, saw the clouds and started to panic. He ran in circles, barking at the wind, trying to scare the storm away. Everyone, run, he roared. Hide in the barn. It's the strongest building. The animals scrambled. The chickens, the goats, even the old barn cat, everyone piled into the big, red barn. But Waffles, he stayed outside, his one floppy ear twitching. Waffles, get inside. Duke yelled, his voice trembling. The wind is coming. Duke. Wait. Waffles shouted back, over the rising gale. The barn door, the latch is broken. If the wind catches it, the whole roof will blow right off. Duke looked at the massive, heavy wooden door. It was shaking, rattling, on the verge of snapping. If they didn't hold it shut, everyone inside would be in danger. Duke ran to the door, and pressed his massive chest against it. I've got it, he grunted. But the wind was like a giant, pushing back. Even Big Duke began to slide, his paws skidding in the mud. I can't hold it alone. Duke gasped. Waffles didn't hesitate. He didn't run away. He barked, a sharp, commanding yip. Goats, line up. Pigs, get behind Duke. Everyone, push. The goats leaned their horns against the wood. The pigs, heavy and solid, braced against the goats. And Waffles? He climbed, all the way up to the broken latch, wedging a thick, sturdy branch into the gap with his tiny, determined teeth. Together, they formed a wall. The wind howled, it screamed, it kicked at the door, but the door didn't budge. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, the town was still standing. Duke slumped against the barn, exhausted, but smiling. I thought I had to be the hero, by myself, Duke said, looking at the little dog. But we would have lost the barn if you hadn't led the way. Waffles. Waffles wagged his tail, shaking the dust off his fur. A single blade of grass breaks in the wind, Duke. But a whole field? It just dances. And so, the animals of Dust Bowl Creek learned the most important lesson of all. Strength isn't just about your muscles, it's about sticking together. The silver whistle and the big city slicker. Just when things were getting nice and quiet, in Dust Bowl Creek, a shiny, silver truck pulled up to the town square. Out hopped a dog that looked like he belonged on a cereal box. His name was Sterling. He was a poodle, but not the fluffy kind. He was tall, groomed to perfection, and wore a collar, encrusted with real diamonds. Sterling looked at the dusty streets, then at Waffles, and wrinkled his nose. Is this it? Sterling asked, his voice smooth, like expensive honey. This is the place everyone is talking about? Where the scruffy one is the boss? Duke stepped forward, protective as ever. Waffles is our leader. He's got heart. He's got grit. Sterling chuckled, a cold, tinkling sound. Grit is just another word for being dirty, darling. In the city, we have systems. We have technology. He showed them a small, silver whistle, hanging from his neck. This is the ultrasonic 5000. With one blow, I can call any human, command any machine, and solve any problem, without getting a single speck of dust on my paws. The town animals were impressed. They had never seen anything so fancy. Why work hard when you can work smart? Sterling bragged. He started bossing everyone around, telling the chickens to align their nests by GPS. And telling the cows they needed a brand identity. Waffles just watched, silent. His one floppy ear tilted. That afternoon, a group of hikers got lost in the Devil's Gulch, a maze of red rocks and deep, narrow canyons. The sun was setting, and a thick, mountain fog began to roll in. Don't worry, Sterling cried, puffing out his chest. I'll use the whistle. The echoes will guide the rescue teams, and everyone will see how a real professional handles a crisis. Sterling stood at the edge of the canyon and blew. Tweet. The sound was high and sharp. But the fog was thick, like wet wool. The sound didn't travel, it just bounced off the first rock and died. Sterling blew again. Tweet. Tweet. Nothing. The hikers couldn't hear it, the rescuers couldn't hear it, and Sterling started to panic. His system was failing. Waffles stepped up, his paws already muddy. Sterling, the city is loud, but the desert is deep. You can't whistle at a mountain. Waffles didn't use a gadget. He used his ears. He pressed them to the ground, listening for the vibration of human footsteps against the canyon floor. There, Waffles whispered. They're in the echo chamber cave. The wind moves through there, it'll carry a scent, but not a whistle. Waffles led the way, belly crawling through the brush, feeling the temperature of the air, reading the broken twigs. He found the hikers, shivering in the dark, and led them out, by the hem of their pants. When they got back to town, Sterling was looking at his silver whistle, looking very, very small. My whistle, it didn't work, Sterling muttered, his perfectly groomed fur, now a mess of burrs and stickers. Waffles sat down, next to the city dog. It's a nice whistle, Sterling. Really shiny. But out here, you can't rely on things that need a battery, or a signal. You have to rely on what's inside you. Sterling looked at his diamond collar, then at Waffles' muddy paws. I think I have a lot to learn about grit. Waffles smiled, a wide, doggy grin. Well, the first lesson is free, Sterling. And it starts with a bath in the creek. And so, the big city dog learned that while gadgets are cool, instinct and experience are what truly save the day. The wall of fire and the ultimate sacrifice. The heat in Dust Bowl Creek wasn't just the summer sun anymore. A dry lightning strike up in the high pines had sparked a monster. A forest fire, so massive, it looked like the horizon was bleeding. The wind, the same wind they had fought before, was now the enemy's best friend, pushing the flames straight toward the town. The animals gathered in the square. The air was thick, with gray ash, falling like snow, but hot. And stinging. Duke looked at the fire, then at the river. The water is too low. We can't swim across, and the bridge is made of old, dry wood. Sterling, the city poodle, opened his eyes wide. He pulled out his silver whistle, but his paws were shaking. My gadgets, they can't stop that. But Waffles stood perfectly still. He wasn't looking at the fire. He was looking at the old stone dam at the top of the ridge. If we don't stop the fire at the bridge, the town is gone, Waffles said, his voice calm, but heavy. Sterling, your whistle. Can it reach the human fire station in the next valley? Sterling gulped. Only if I get to the highest peak. But the path is already burning. Waffles looked at Duke. You're the strongest. You have to carry Sterling through the smoke. He needs to get to the top. And what about you? Duke asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. I'll stay at the bridge, Waffles whispered. The fire is jumping from tree to tree. If I can dampen the wood and clear the brush, it might buy you enough time for the helicopters to arrive. Duke and Sterling took off. Duke ran like he had never run before, his massive lungs burning, while Sterling clung to his back, shielding his eyes from the sparks. Back at the bridge, Waffles was working, frantically. He used his teeth to drag wet logs, he used his paws to dig a trench in the dirt, a fire break, to stop the flames from crawling. He was tiny, and the heat was like a physical weight, pressing him down. Crack. A burning branch fell, pinning Waffles' tail to the ground. He yelped, the pain was sharp, like a needle. But he didn't stop. He chewed through the branch, his fur singed, his eyes watering. Suddenly, from the highest peak, a sound pierced the roar of the fire. Tweet. Tweet. Tweet tweet tweet. It was Sterling. He wasn't just blowing the whistle. He was blowing a signal. An SOS that he had learned back in the city. Minutes felt like hours. Waffles stood on the bridge, the flames licking at the other side, waiting, hoping. Then, a shadow. No. 3 shadows. Giant, metal birds, the firefighting helicopters, roared over the ridge. They dropped thousands of gallons of water, a massive, blue curtain, that fell right on the bridge and the edge of the town. The fire hissed and died. When the smoke finally cleared, Duke and Sterling rushed back. They found Waffles, covered in soot, shivering, but alive. Sterling walked up and unclipped his diamond collar. He placed it around Waffles' neck. I used to think this was what made me special, Sterling said, his voice cracking. But today, I saw what real leadership looks like. You stood your ground when the world was on fire. Waffles shook his head, the diamonds clinking against his scruffy fur. I didn't stand alone, Sterling. You gave the signal, and Duke gave the legs. I just held the door. Dust Bowl Creek survived. And from that day on, people say, if you listen closely on a quiet night, you can hear a silver whistle, and a deep bark, and a tiny, happy yip, the sounds of three friends, who prove that when you combine strength, smarts, and heart, even a wildfire has to back down. The Legend of the Golden Bone and the Hidden Cave. After the big fire, things in Dust Bowl Creek changed. The town wasn't just a place to live anymore, it was a family. But every family has a secret, and every town has a legend. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the purple mountains, an old, wandering coyote named Old Man Silas limped into town. He sat by the fountain, and whispered a story that made even Duke's fur stand on end. They say. Silas wheezed. That deep inside the echoing caverns lies the golden bone. It's not just gold, it's a relic from the first pack. Whoever finds it can speak the language of the winds and protect the valley forever. Sterling's eyes sparkled. A treasure? Now that sounds like an adventure. My GPS map shows a cave system just 3 miles north. But Waffles sensed something else. He smelled a storm, but not a rainstorm. A storm of greed. We don't need gold to protect our home, Waffles said, his voice low. But if that bone falls into the wrong hands, like the shadow wolves from the north, they'll use that power to rule us. The trio, Waffles, Duke, and Sterling, set off at midnight. The caverns were terrifying. Huge stalactites hung like dragon's teeth from the ceiling. Every time Duke barked, the echo sounded like 100 ghosts barking back. I don't like this, Duke whimpered. His big tail tucked between his legs. It's too quiet. Suddenly. Clack. Sterling had stepped on a pressure plate. The floor began to slide. Help, he cried. Waffles leaped, catching Sterling's collar in his teeth, pulling him back, just as the ground opened up into a bottomless pit. Focus. Waffles commanded. Sterling, use your high beam collar light. Duke, use your strength to move those boulders. We have to reach the center, before the sun rises. They reached a massive, glowing chamber. And there, on a stone pedestal, was the golden bone. It pulsed with a soft, amber light. But they weren't alone. Out of the shadows, stepped Cain. A massive, jet-black wolf, with eyes like burning coals. He was the leader of the shadow wolves. Step aside, little dog, Cain growled, showing teeth the size of steak knives. That power belongs to the strong. Not to pets. Cain lunged, but Duke blocked him. They crashed together, a battle of pure muscle. But Cain was fast and mean. He pinned Duke down. Duke! Sterling screamed. He blew his silver whistle, but it wasn't a signal for help. He blew it at a specific frequency he had programmed to make the cavern walls vibrate. The rocks began to shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. Cain looked up, distracted for just a second. That was all Waffles needed. He didn't attack Cain. He ran, straight for the pedestal. Waffles grabbed the golden bone. As his teeth touched the gold, a massive, blinding light filled the cave. The spirits of the first pack appeared in the air, swirling like silver mist. The spirits didn't see a scruffy dog. They saw a hero. The light was too bright for Cain. He held in pain and retreated, running back into the dark, where the shadows live. The cave grew still. The golden bone turned into regular white stone in Waffles' mouth. The gold was gone, but the power stayed in the air. It wasn't gold at all, Sterling whispered, looking at the plain bone. It was a test. Waffles placed the bone back on the pedestal. The power isn't in the bone, Sterling. The power was the three of us coming here together. They walked out of the cave, just as the first light of dawn hit the valley. Dust Bowl Creek was safe. Not because of a treasure, but because they had each other.